The next speaker is Ms. Tejaswini Aphale, and she and her colleagues are going to be. Uh, you're talking now. Okay. Instead of okay. So Pallavee will be talking on behalf of the team, and your topic is from documentation to dissemination, database creation for Konkan petroglyphs.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for this conference and having this session for the geoglyphs especially. Let me put one or two disclaimers. This is probably going to be the most non-academic presentation of the whole lot. The point is, of course, we are cognizant of the fact that a lot of invaluable research is happening about geoglyphs and on geoglyphs. And the idea of this presentation is to actually demonstrate what is the rationale to bring all these research together and weave some narrative which can help us to project these sites as World Heritage. Just to give you an idea, there is a process happening to nominate 8 or 9 selected geoglyph sites for World Cultural Heritage sites. Yeah. So there is a big team working on this, Creative Footprints from Delhi, Tejaswini Aphale Associates, Biome, and Nisarga Yatri from Ratnagiri. And I'm just presenting the work that is happening collaboratively. We have already heard a lot about geoglyphs, so these are just a couple of key points about geoglyphs to set the stage. That's roughly the geography where the sites are located, the coastal Konkan area, mostly Ratnagiri and Sindhudurga, and of course a site in Goa. And these are rock art of its own kind because we haven't seen similar stuff anywhere else in the subcontinent. Or there are lot of local initiatives in identification of these sites, also proactive efforts to protect. There are a couple of DST projects that are happening on these sites. And of course, there are possibilities of conservations even by local initiatives and through professional or through people like Tejaswini or Mrudula who are helping the locals to protect these sites to a certain extent. This is a short sentence from the tentative list that is put there on the World Heritage website. I have just highlighted a couple of key points because they kind of highlight what we can say as the, what is that? Outstanding cultural value of these geoglyphs and why these have a potential to actually become World Heritage. So what you can see is these are all on laterite plateau, which is a very, very specific geography or geology you can think. It's an open air ensemble unlike the paintings in caves. It's of course a human expression and we are trying to understand what it entails to the people in the past. This is a journey in very short timeline. What you can see is it is being discovered by modern world, that is us, since just last few years, not even more than 2 decades probably. There has been a lot of news in media and publicity happening. There are government initiatives. It has already become a tourist attraction parallel to all this. And then there is academic research that is happening. So all these things are going in parallel as of now. Though I have shown it like a timeline, all these are not really going through a particular sequence, but a lot of things happening in parallel. The result is all the things are impacting each other. So when the tourists are coming, of course we need to think of conservation. But when we are thinking of conservation, of course we need to think about whether we are damaging the site or protecting the site. So that is the reason why this timeline or this interrelation matters. The presentations from this and the previous session where we talked about geoglyphs, we are looking at comparative analysis with paintings. We are looking at regional specifications, if any, like an example from Lanja Tehsil. There are tools which Mrudula demonstrated where we are looking at 3D documentation with LiDAR and photogrammetric tools. And then of course, contextual data through Kodoshi excavations and parts work that we are seeing. So basically there are multiple data sets that are coming together which can help us to create this outstanding value or understand the outstanding value of these glyphs. This is just an experiment. This is a paper from 2018 by Tejaswini and others. This is a very experimental word cloud that I tried to create. Word cloud is basically, it looks at the frequency of the words in a given text, and whichever word appears maximum number of times, it is highlighted bigger. So the size basically indicates the frequency of the word. Interestingly, what we see here, the biggest or the most frequent word is petroglyph, but today we are calling these as geoglyphs. The whole idea is we are still evolving as to how we perceive these phenomena or how we document these and how we can really interpret going forward. So this word cloud basically indicates that we are in a very nascent stage to document and understand these glyphs. And because now we are talking about World Heritage, it requires us to take not just a bird's eye view, but a detailed view of all the sites that are known to us by now, and then understand how these things can be documented together. And then once we know what to document, we need to come up with a framework, which could be a database or multiple databases, where we will have to move from qualitative to quantitative to certain extent wherever possible. There are going to be a lot of measurements and abstractions which we have seen. There are going to be interdisciplinary data sets where we looked at Akiala's presentation, where she talked about changes in probably sea level and changes in the landscape, and differential information about the sites. So for some sites we have a lot of information, some sites are still getting to be known. Like for example, in Tarkik's presentation, we saw a couple of glyphs from site of Kot, but there are a few more geoglyphs that have been discovered in last 2-3 months. So it's all evolving. And then finally, the idea of World Heritage is how we reach the masses, how we reach the society with this information. So there has to be some information dissemination mechanism of this academic research that is happening probably in this room. So how we take this outside this room. So what to document? We already know what we are documenting, but I have just kind of categorized it in some abstract ways, the way we perceive. So we have empirical observations, we have material and landscape inquiries, we have comparative studies with paintings, maybe other regional geoglyphs and those kind of comparisons. Of course, we have ethnographic studies which are probably at a very early stage. We are yet to see any sizable or understandable comparisons with the present day traditions, and the contextual inputs across space and time, not just with lithic assemblage, but of course with landscape or other habitation deposits, if any. And then these are the words on the right hand side basically indicate what is it that we will always encounter when we try to convert this information into a database. So we cannot get away with the different scales of the data. We cannot get away without abstracting the data, or we cannot get away unless we define some hierarchy of this information. So when we actually start putting this database together, and we are in that process right now. So this presentation is probably a presentation of the process, not the end result. So while we are documenting this data, there are a lot of problems that we are facing. There are a lot of nuances of the decisions that we take. So maybe I can just highlight 1 or 2 examples here. When we are moving, say, from qualitative to quantitative data, how I measure the geoglyphs. For example, in the previous slide, there was an example of pair of birds. When I say pair, I'm documenting 1 pair. But if I document birds, I'm going to document 2 birds. And now in the next slides, you will see how how the repercussions of these documentations are seen when we are actually looking at data set at a broader scale. Or an example could be redundant or missing data. So we will know that some data or some information is redundant only when we document it and compare or analyze it in with the view of remaining information. So right now, probably we don't have much choice but to document or gather as much as we can. So then we have an ability to filter out what is important. And then this is just a visualization of how we are trying to relate the things and what are we trying to get out of it. So say for example, when we are trying to relate geoglyphs and presently known archaeological sites, it could be from different periods. We are trying to understand temporal context and where the geoglyphs might fit in the whole picture. When we are probably trying to relate geoglyphs and art traditions, probably we are trying to look at continuity, if at all. So these are just few examples, and the relationships are at a very abstract level. We can, when we create a narrative, it's always going to be descriptive and more more added with smaller data sets and relatable information. So here is an example. I just tried to, now this is not all data, this is all work in progress, but just to visualize, I have just organized a few 50, 60 odd sites or probably more from south to north. So left hand side, I mean the starting of x-axis is south and we are moving northwards, and it's a total number of geoglyphs found at every site. Now this is the bar graph as of now. Once we decide how we are going to count, this graph might change. Here is one more example. Now when we are actually identifying the geoglyphs, you can see the first two examples. One says stylized elephant, other says elephant. And these are being counted separately as of now. Again, let me make it clear that this is a very raw information. We are yet to work on it. But that is how it is showing up when we start looking at like 100 plus sites. You can see that geometric is probably the most frequent category in this, and maybe cupels or fish after that. Now to go one step deeper into this information gathering and relationship, this is an example where I spoke about hierarchy. So at a primary level, we are trying to look at whether a particular site has, on the left-hand side, you can see any of these kind of geoglyphs, because right now we are able to categorize it based on how we perceive those, like whether these are terrestrial animals, whether these are geometric motifs or birds, etc. And then as an example of terrestrial animals, you can see on the left-hand side, we have listed the animals which have been found till now. And then there are two things, one about the size and one about the technique. So it could be a larger than life or a miniature and how it is being carved. I'm just showing you examples from a lot of other things, but these could be like most interesting examples. So I showed it here. And now this is again an example of enriching the database. On the left-hand side map, you see the yellow pointers are the pins of places mentioned in, say, historic texts or earlier literature, mostly ports or archaeological places or like early historic places or forts, and the blue pins are the geoglyph sites. Now, of course, these places create a context, but it is probably a very late context because presently the geoglyph sites are probably being dated at least 7,000 to 8,000 years before present or even more. Now when we add some more sites to it, which are probably from Paleolithic, Mesolithic and Neolithic time periods or those cultural contexts, this is how the data set looks. Now what we are doing here is the context changes when we add this extra information. So the experimental thing that we are doing right now is when we do some GIS techniques through all these locations, how are we able to encounter the geoglyph sites in the topography? So, and in those kind of exercises, more locations matter more locations with the existing studies or known histories. Histories as in academic histories. And so then at the end of this entire result, at the end of this database churning and documentation, what is it that we are trying to infer? And most of us have been talking about it. So we are trying to understand intentions of these carvings, whether these were like memories or just like time pass, what Parth mentioned, or whether these were actually communication to future generations or people across regions. We are trying to understand persona of these carvers or the viewers or the users. Of course, the period and contemporaneity of different geoglyphs and other contexts, and contact. It could be within the sites, across region. And so when we try to create information out of this to share it with the society, with common people, because we are trying to put this as a World Heritage, because we feel that this is not just valuable for Konkan or Indian archaeology or Indian academia, but for the entire world. The information has to be appropriate for public consumption, so it has to be very easy, it has to be informative and just. What I mean by just is, we may not want to interpret something based on our ideas or our perceptions. It has to be relatable. It could be inconclusive yet well researched, so it has to be very, very material centric, but we don't necessarily have to reach a conclusion about these glyphs, because as we can see, it is very much evolving at a very fast rate. And of course, it has to be open for interpretation, because what we interpret today is going to be based on the data that we have today. Maybe 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, there could be newer, different, probably opposite interpretations also. So, and about the World Heritage, maybe Tejaswini will give a glimpse of what the process is like with respect to geoglyphs and what we have done so far and where we are going to move from here.
Thank you. So I don't know if we have time to explain the process. Maybe when we are talking, we can explain, or we can talk more about the process. But how this paper or how this research really started. When we started with the geoglyph nomination procedure preparation, there are different people working on different aspects. Today also we are working on different aspects. And then everybody thought that they have information. Then World Heritage started working when it actually started writing. Our lead bidder, Shami Chatterjee, she is a World Heritage expert. And World Heritage is actually not a research. World Heritage is actually an end or maybe a milestone in the research. It can, after World Heritage also you can research, but that research or World Heritage, whatever we are conceptualization, it's basically a story, presenting a story of geoglyphs. And then that also has to be on the published research. That needs to have some basis. But when we actually started working on it, then we realized that it was very sporadic. One, we already knew, Dr. Garge, and we already knew that it was very premature effort, but at least it will kind of boost research in this aspect. When we started working more and more on this research, we realized one thing, me and Pallavee, we realized one thing, that there are so many aspects. It may be ethnological, it may be geological, it may be anthropology, just physical documentation. There are so many aspects, and every aspect is needed, is necessary to understand one geoglyph. None of the geoglyphs can we can understand them well by only applying one research or one aspect of the research. And then there are somebody working on physical documentation, there are people working on research, zoological research, but then there was a gap. What about database? Everything has to come together. If I have to give ma'am some information or something to analyze, then that information has to be together. we don't have much of the information right now together at once. So we started working on a concept of creating a database where at least there will be basic information, and then we can gather more information, we can update that database, and on basis of that database, people can do more research even after World Heritage nomination is completed. So this was our just a initial process, just initial thinking, where it is quite a nascent stage. Let's see how it is going to take us more, we are going to talk to Parth also about that, and many people here are part of the World Heritage process. Riza is there, Akela, Pallavee, Dev ma'am is there, and also Parth is there. So I hope everything will come together and we can make these geoglyphs as a World Heritage, not monuments, but World Heritage nominated properties. Thank you so much.
Anyone has questions for the talk?
Along the Indian Ocean Rim. Do you think there might have been any connection at all? Or it's really not right?
Again, this is a question in our mind also. That's why we are kind of collecting more and more data. We don't have data right now.
No, not our data. What I'm also referring to is the already existing sites. Are there any other existing rock art sites or petroglyph sites on the Indian Ocean Rim? I'm coming from the other perspective, along the other coastlines.
No, we have not worked on it. We still have to kind of create a proper database.
Other existing database of other countries.
Other sites. That's why I'm looking.
I think for me, I have that very famous one of whale hunting,
Right.
which is also geoglyphics. It's right up the ocean. But it is, I mean, it does not that much resemble some of the marine animals. That's a very famous site. I think they might already have more.
I'll check. I just want to.
Southeast Asia, I think we could look for connections.
Yes. Okay.
Because there's a lot of recent discoveries of rock art in Southeast Asia, and some of them are as old as the oldest. But some of them may be connected.
Yeah. So I just wanted to not answer, but further complicate the question, that we are looking at sites which are probably dated to a time period where the sea levels were also different. So the landscape that we see and the landscape that we perceive from accessibility point of view, the picture could be entirely different.
That is actually given. I mean, that complexity
It is given, but how it impacts our interpretation.
So I'm not even coming to the interpretation.
How it matters to seeing fish or aquatic animal. I'm coming to that.
No, so my question was actually more about situating the sites.
Right.
So it is not, interpretation is still, it will be a later.
No, right now we are also working on only on situating the sites, not on interpretation, because again,
if there are any other coastal petroglyph sites or geoglyph sites in any of the other regions, like East Coast of Africa or Gulf of Oman, Persia.
I think through our database will give more, it will give rise to more questions. What are the patterns?
Even if you collect data from entire world, try to interpret this with that data, it won't be any.
No, and another thing, we see this data will only help in, not only, but this will help in kind of coming up with patterns. What are the patterns? What are further analytical, what can be more questions? What can be the further research? But for that also, we don't have data, enough data.
My impression with the World Heritage, It's nothing to do with research.
No, no.
It's basically their questions about access to the site,
No.
protection of the site. Because
So it's like-
OTA had been involved in the nomination.
But long back, long back. Now, the process has changed first. So
Also
process-
different categories. in the-
Correct, correct.
you
So
know.
site management and what you are saying is right, that is given. World Heritage also needs that. World Heritage also needs that if your geoglyph is on private land, how that owner is going to, what is the connection between the owner and the site manager. If government is going to manage the site, how he is going to keep it for next 50 years. So these things are there, these things are bad. But again, we have to propose prove that why we want to have this as world heritage site.
Significance, global
Exactly,
significance.
basic.
Why?
Global, regional, everything. Even when we say that she has an elephant and Kachai also has an elephant, what are the differences or what are the unique attributes for those particular sites? Why we are selecting them?
But your purpose in nominating it is what?
There are three things I would say. One, that site should be on global maps. For again, there are different aspects of tourism. People should know that. Second, exactly, global map. Second, World Heritage definitely gives that site some protection, conservation protection. Otherwise, most of
You
the
have
sites-
to do it.
Yes. Government has to do it.
Yeah.
But then World Heritage Center expects you to have robust mechanism for protection. And nobody can just come and just start quarrying there, or just start working on some conservation aspect. There has to be methodical methodology written over there. Then how you are going to do. And for me, having conservation system makes a lot of difference. And third, it opens up research, more research globally.
I'll just tell you, I was by some fluke, I got an invitation to one of these conference in Korea. They have an UNESCO and it was about nominating prehistoric sites or suggesting prehistoric sites for nomination. So when I heard about everything, every money, everything has to come from the hosting institute.
Yes.
You have to do everything,
Yes.
and then they give you nothing.
Nothing.
So there was one minister from Malaysia, and she has nominated so many sites, and not any one of them was worth any site that I've seen in India. So I asked her, like, why did you do it? And so she said, it increased the tourism and income so much, and so she was doing it on behalf of generating income for Malaysia.
Yes.
Now, if that is the thing, then see, you people are not into the income generation. You are into the research. So your objective is basically understanding this wonderful phenomenon which has popped up. Now, if it just enhances tourism, that might be completely counter to your
No,
objective.
actually for that only we have to
So
have some
what I understand from you, like the objective which is actually useful is the conservation.
Yes. And tourism is going to increase, and tourism has increased in last 5-6 years as well. But we have to be prepared for that increased tourism, and not only locally, not only on the
So
site, but
this
also
will
on the regional level.
generate, this will give a push to the
Yes.
Indian government,
Yes.
to the Indian authorities.
And locals also. And third, I have worked on multiple World Heritage sites and I have studied also. And one thing is sure that when particular site gains attention, lot more people start working on it. So far, there were some people working on it. There were not many aspects, not many different kind of sites to work. But people will have, that sites will get more focus and people will start working on it. But working is one thing, as you are saying, more tourism and more income. Angkor Wat, Cambodia has suffered like anything, Barcelona has suffered like anything. But again, even Ajanta for that matter has suffered. But all these sites got nominated really early. Now they are very particular about how your site you are presenting.
and how you are going to manage the site. They are quite critical about it.
So the periodic cycle will be like
Yes.
we have to reduce pressure on the local government.
So Indian government have to give them periodic reviews. Even Hampi suffered with one thing that PWD Karnataka, they started working on bridge, and it was quite close to one of the sites. Nobody had done anything. किसी ने just letter भेज दिया कि वहाँ पे एक bridge बन रहा है, and that entire site went into endangered site basically. And so Indian government had to do a lot of things again with more methodical approach and more strategies, and from political and administrative point of view also, to get that site out, because again that becomes it is India's site for work. So वो India के लिए दबा होता है कि ये thing. So then government takes a lot of takes care. And now that procedure is very simple.
About tourism, I mean, just add one word. I mean, even before it is being nominated, say, for World Heritage.
You can't avoid it.
No. So tourists are already coming because it is getting very, very popular in social media, WhatsApp, Facebook, everything. So I have seen people coming in buses and seeing these sites, actually going off-road in search of these sites.
Right.
Now the thing is, because now I work on these sites, I know quite a few places. So I keep sharing locations here and there. Whether I should do it or not is one question. But on the other side, it's our heritage, right? So people do have every right to go and visit it. The crux is when there are tourists who, of course, we want, because we want them to come and see, appreciate, value, basically. How best can we manage? And that best management would be enforced on the government because of the efforts like World Heritage or protection by the state or
Otherwise,
the
our
national
management will be very thin.
No, I mean, yeah, even getting this project,
Yeah.
because you are preparing for heritage management.
Yeah.
For this, meeting.
And what you said is perfectly right. That
Actually,
there is no money that
randomly given this invitation. I had nothing to do with anything, but obviously if somebody is inviting me to Korea for a 3-day thing, I went. But that was the only interaction.
Yes,
That was,
exactly.
maybe 2002, 2000.
frankly speaking, I mean, you can add more, but at least I have no experience of working on World Heritage, but at least the sites that we know as of today in India, which are World Heritage properties, I don't think any of those were actually nominated for the tourism interest, if I'm right.
No, it's like Malaysia.
We have,
No, but people do that. People do that. I have seen. Even ministers, so we worked on Aurangabad nomination for sites in Aurangabad city. Everybody no, Aurangabad is a historic city. We have to have it in World Heritage. But then nobody was ready to work on the management. How you are going to save those buildings? Even if you are going to save Ahmedabad is a great example. Mrudula knows.
Ahmedabad's intention was only
Exactly. So now there are 3 stages in World Heritage nomination. One, when you just it's an initial proposal for tentative World Heritage nomination. Then after a year, you have to prepare a preliminary assessment report. So it's like a mini nomination dossier, but you have to work a lot over that. It will go and then it will tell you if your site is ready for World Heritage nomination. Because you have to show what kind of management
Because a lot of it is
right.
about the management.
And after a point, yes, World Heritage is somewhere business, and commercial aspects are there, but then it's up to you, it's up to us how we are going to best balance between both.
No, so it's obviously something very beneficial.
Yes.
But the implications are.
So we have to manage that. And as the World Heritage, Riza can tell me, Mrudula can tell me, since the point World Heritage word has come to Konkan for these geoglyphs, people have suddenly started, there is a spike in interest. And also there is spike in people awareness as well.
More sites also started reporting. So when I attended that meeting, I was surprised how few
Yeah.
India were nominated because there were hundreds of them that could do any of them that had
Right.
So it was actually what I felt it was a lack of interest from Indians
Right.
to actually get into that. They were not really. So now the interest has started.
Yeah.
It was more of Europe, like they mostly tourism is much more
Oh, Europe,
important
yeah.
than one of the things here. But tourism has lots of local benefits. So it is
And adverse impact as well. And also, people do ask us why we selected only 9 sites. If there are more than we are talking about 1700 geoglyphs and all, then again management definitely plays part because these are privately owned. You cannot have 150 sites because half the Ratnagiri district will be under protection.
And touch upon the criteria and the category.
Yeah, right. So when we are talking about how we are going to select these sites for world, can we talk first? Thank you. So,
I mean, it doesn't affect me. I don't know what the schedule is after this. The organizers can tell me how much time we have. Riza, do we have enough time for more discussions?
yeah, basically we'll
Okay. I mean, I'm happy to say yes.
Yeah, basically we moved our session after because there were